One second. ಅದೇನೋ slow ಬರ್ತದೆ.
Good afternoon, everyone. We wish a happy and warm regards of 6th National Ayurveda Day to everyone on behalf of GMC Mysore. On this special occasion, we are pleased to organize a webinar on Ayurvedavatarana by eminent speaker and renowned teacher Dr. Anand Katti sir. I welcome you all for this event. We have our beloved principal Dr. Gajanana Hegde sir with us. I welcome him for this event. I also welcome today's guest speaker Dr. Anand Katti sir for this event. I welcome all my beloved teachers of GMC Mysore and teachers who joined us online all over India. I extend my warm welcome to all Ayurveda fraternity, UG and PG students who are with us online and offline. Now, I request Dr. Kallesh to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Anand Katti sir.
Good afternoon, all respected dignitaries. It is my privilege to introduce one of the eminent scholar of Ayurveda, Dr. Anand Katti sir. Sir has completed BMS from AV Samhita AMC Bijapur and PG in Department of Samhita Siddhanta from BNM AMC Bijapur. Sir is having more than 18 years of teaching experience. Sir also worked as assistant professor in our institution, and sir worked as assistant registrar in RGHS Bengaluru. Presently working as an associate professor in GAMC Bengaluru. Sir has published many articles in national and international journals. Sir worked as a guide in Samhita Siddhanta department and guided many students, and also collaborated research conducted with DFRL, CFTRI. Now also, sir is working as a BOS member for Kerala University and faculty member in RGHS University. Sir is having uniqueness in research activities. Due to lack of time, I would like to introduce on today's eminent speaker by one word, that is Adade Maduvanu Rudeli Uttama. Sir is belonging to this category. Now I request Dr. Anand Katti sir to start the session. Over to you, sir.
Sabhaya Namaha. I hope I am audible to you.
Yes, sir.
यो विश्वं विदधाति पाति सततं संहारयत्यञ्जसा सृष्ट्वा दिव्यमहोषधीश्च विविधान् दूरीकरोत्यामयान् बिभ्राणोऽञ्जलिना च कास्ति भुवने पीयूषपूर्णं घटं तं धन्वन्तरिरूपमीशमवलं वन्दामहे श्रेयसे. Offering my salutations to the lotus feet of Lord Dhanvantari, who is the creator of Ayurveda. And we all know the fact that today, on the occasion of Dhanatrayodashi, we are celebrating the Dhanvantari Jayanti. At the outset, I thank the organizers, particularly Dr. Gajanan Hegde sir, who is the principal of the Government Ayurveda Medical College, Mysuru, with whom I share a very fond memories, cherished memories when I was there working as an assistant professor in the Department of Samhita Siddhanta. And together we have done so many tasks when he was given the charges at the universities. And I thank Dr. Gajanan Hegde sir for this opportunity. I thank Dr. Vasudev Chate sir, who is my friend, philosopher, mentor. Whenever I have anything to any issues, the first thing that I call will be Dr. Chate sir. Thank you again, Dr. Chate sir, for inviting me to this session. I extend cordial thanks to the event organizers, the coordinators, Dr. Anurupa and Dr. Mohan Kumari Madam, Dr. Srivatsa sir, and again, to name, there are many, all of the teaching faculty in that college happens to be a friend list of mine with whom I share a very fond memories. I, on this occasion, extend greetings of the day. Wish you all a happy Dhanvantari Jayanti, happy Ayurveda Day celebrations also. When this topic was discussed, I mean, when it so happened that Dr. Chate called me and said that in the meeting it was decided that there should be a session on the. Just a minute, I'll start sharing my screen. Is my screen visible? Anyone should confirm me.
Yes, sir, it is visible, sir.
Okay, fine. So they were talking about having a discussion on Dhanvantari, and I said we can have a discussion on Ayurvedavatarana. So because we have this topic as soon as we come to the first year BMS, we are taught about the Ayurvedavatarana, and the students who come from the science background usually will not be in a better position to receive it. Right? They come with a different mindset, and when we talk about Ayurvedavatarana, the Devaloka, the Bhuloka, the Swarga, Naraka, etc., it will be the student will immediately start thinking where I have come. So this I chose to have a discussion on this topic, that whether it is mythology or history, what is the Ayurvedavatarana, and can we appreciate all the things that have happened in the past in today's generation also? Can there be a history attached to this? Was there just the creation of some minds, some intellect, or the things they really have happened? Are they really happened, the things, or not, is what will be the discussion that we'll be talking about in a sort of around 40 to 45 minutes of interaction. Now, when we look into the title has got three words. One is Ayurveda Avatarana, the second one is mythology, and the third one is history. Now, before we go into the subject itself, we'll look into the pada and artha of these. Right? What is mythology, what is history, and what is Ayurveda Avatarana? After that, we'll go into the subject. So, this is a copy paste of the what is the meaning of mythology from the Google. Says mythology is it's basically a term coming from Greek, where it says mythos for story of the people, and logos refers to the science. So it is effectively the study, the meaning, which says that it is the collection of such stories which deal with various aspects of human condition, good or evil, meanings, suffering, the human origin, the origin of place and names, animals, cultural values, the traditions, the meaning of life and death, the afterlife, the celestial stories of the gods or the god. So whenever we talk about God, so it is beyond the domain of human perception, that we largely have to depend on something that is beyond the scope of our own understanding or our own experience, to be specific. It's not understanding. Understanding is possible, but experience, I cannot experience this from my own eyes. Right? So such stories which are difficult to understand, which are difficult to appreciate, which are difficult to comprehend, which are difficult to connect ourselves immediately with the facts, will be known as mythology. And therefore, since they are not easily understandable, we have come to a stage where myth is considered to be the opposite word of fact. Right? Fact, you might have seen many such presentations, the myth versus fact. Fact is something that we know it is real. So by contrary, by the same logic, the myth becomes something which is unreal, which may not be correct. Right? So myth versus fact is a common notion that we see, and fact is something which is existed, and myth something which may not exist. Right? That is what is the meaning that we get from the word mythology. And if you look into the dictionary meaning of this myth, it says a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of the people, or explaining the natural social phenomenon, and involving supernatural beings or events. So when we talk about supernatural, certainly supernatural beings, because we believe that we are the natural beings, and therefore someone who is more powerful, more mightier, having more power or we know supernaturals and supernatural beings or events are not that easy to comprehend, not that easy to understand, not that easy to explain also, right? So is the case. So therefore, when we talk about Samudra Manthana, so we have this question: did it really happen? Right? Did it really happen? So when we talk about the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, all these were, they form in the ambit of whether they are myth or fact, right? So this is what is the myth. Myth usually is something which is not easy to understand. Where we have this doubt: did it happen? Did it is just a story? Is this just a creation of some human imagination? Is it an imaginary story? So something of that we call it as myth, opposite of which is the reality, that is a fact. And okay, so this is what is the mythology. Now, in our title, we termed Ayurvedavatarana. The mythology is one thing, and the other one is the history. Now, let's look into what the history is. Before looking into what history is, what is the nature of mythology? There are some characteristics of anything that we call as a myth. Myth is, we generally say that we have come to an era where we say myth is false, because opposite is fact, fact is true. So therefore, myth has got some characteristics. Myth has no identifiable author. There are no authenticity given to the myth. A myth that is written down in a literary form uses a story that it preceded it. So it may be a story when Chavana Maharshi became young, being treated by Ashwinis, or it may be a story when Nakshatra Raja Chandra suffered from Raja Yakshma, right? All these are narrated in the form of stories, which are very difficult to appreciate in the present day. So they are present day, and so therefore we tend to say that they are myth, and by saying them that they are myth, we are effectively saying that they are not real, they are false. So sometimes one version may be more true than the other, so which is also the case with the Ayurvedavatarana, because in case of Ayurvedavatarana also we have directly three versions. One version available in Charaka Samhita, one version available in Sushruta Samhita, one version available in Kashyapa Samhita, which are the three major sources for the Ayurvedavatarana. So this is the nature of myth. We have some four theories for myth also, which will come at the end. Now we shall look into what is history. Now, history, when we talk about this word is easy for you to understand, because all of you who are in the first year BMS or any BMS, you would have learned history in your high school, right? History is the story of the past, and in history we learn the facts. We learn something that happened in the past. We learn the story of the people, the places, and the events. So we know how we took the independence. That is a history, right? We know how the battles were fought. That is a history. We know how the geography, how the nation developed. That is a history. We know various events, and all this is a part of history. And history is basically, so therefore it's a chronological record. Third point on the screen, the last point on the screen: chronological record of significant events such as those affecting the nation, the institution, often including the explanation of their causes. So this is history. So when we talk about history, we're talking about something that happened in the past. It may be a history of a war, history of a civilization, history of, for example, we are in the COVID-19 era. So we talk about history of pandemics. So when we look back into the history of the pandemics or the epidemics, we go to the previous eras where Spanish flu was there, where bubonic plague suffered us. So all this is history that has happened, right? History means something that has happened, and by logic, so something that is seemingly given as history but may not have happened, is what we call as myth. And therefore we have mythology and history as competing as an equivalent or rather opposite meaning words. Now, this is what we mean by Ayurvedavatarana, and we learn it in the Vagbhata's verses Brahma Smritva Yasho Vedam Prajapati Majigrahat So Ashwinav Tav Sahasraksham So Triputradhikan Munin Tegniveshadikan Stetu Prataktantrani Tenide. So Brahma recollected everything and shared it to Daksha Prajapati, and who in turn shared it to Ashwini Kumaras, and thereafter the Indra learnt, and from Indra the Bharadwaja learnt and brought to the Bhuloka is what we call. And from Sushruta Samhita we get to see that Dhanvantari learnt, and Sushruta Samhita was created. This is what we learn by Ayurvedavatarana. But then, if you know this Ayurvedavatarana, where it is placed in your syllabus, it is placed. We learn the Ayurveda Avatarana in Ayurveda Itihasa, and we know the fact that Itihasa is history. So, suddenly a question comes: what is this Ayurveda Avatarana doing in Ayurveda Itihasa? Because we know the Ayurveda Avatarana is a mythology; it's a Puranika Vishaya. It is an imaginary story, because we could never comprehend the understanding of Samudra Manthana. We could never understand the stories of Ashwini's treating, reversing the ages, etc. So, what this stories, which are creation of human mind, are doing in the study of Ayurveda Itihasa, what they are doing in the history, is a question, right? So, when we ask this question, one of the answer that we should get is maybe it has happened. Maybe all these have happened in the past. Maybe we have long journey. We have done a long journey. We have disassociated ourselves from those things to such an extent that we are not in a position to understand them. Maybe that is what is the meaning. Then a question comes: if they have happened, how could they have happened? Because we talk about in the Samudra Manthana, so many things came. The Visha came, the Amrita came, the Indra, the Airavata came, the Chandra came. So many things came. Then what is the real meaning of this? So all these are the puzzles. All these are the difficult things that are very difficult to understand. So to some extent, we'll try to look into all these, try to solve all these puzzles, or try to look into all these questions. Now, before going into the subject proper, there is another term that we need to learn. So, title was Ayurveda Avatarana, History or Mythology. We learned what is mythology, we learned what is history. Now we shall look into what is Ayurveda Avatarana. One of the mistakes that most of the Ayurveda Itihasa books make is they translate this Ayurveda Avatarana is equal to origin of Ayurveda. Now, is it a correct translation? No, it is not. Because if you look into the dictionaries, we have Ayurveda Avatarana means landing. Avatarana means descent. Avatarana means descent from one place to the another place. Right? Avatarana is landing, or Avatarana is descent, and therefore Ayurveda Avatarana should be translated as descent of Ayurveda only. It is not the origin of Ayurveda. Now then, what is this? Then why these history books translate it as origin of Ayurveda? Now this has to be answered also. Now, what really is the origin of Ayurveda? Now, what really is the origin? When we talk about the origin of Ayurveda, we should know the fact that that Ayurveda is a Shashvata Shastra. We learn it, and we quote three reasons also. We term it as Soyam Ayurvedaha Shashvato Nirdishyate Anaditvat Swabhava Samsiddha Lakshanatvat Bhava Swabhava Nityatvat Cha. This Ayurveda is a Shashvata. So Shashvata means anything which is eternal will exist for all the times. So for that, there can be no reason, right? One of no origin, because the shloka itself says Anavi. It doesn't have an Adi. Anything which doesn't have an Adi or beginning will also have no end, and therefore this Ayurveda doesn't have an origin, right? So this Ayurveda doesn't have an origin. What does it mean then? It means that might have had its opening origin right from the origin of the life, because we know Ayu is life, and the science of life is known as Ayurveda, and the science of life should also have taken its origin from the origin of life itself, and therefore you cannot differentiate between the life and the Ayurveda, because when the life originated, at that time itself the life protecting measures also would have originated, and that is what is Ayurveda. But then why do we learn about this story, this Brahma, Daksha, etc., under the banner of Ayurveda Avatarana, or the origin of Ayurveda? Probably the answer for this question is, until that time, it was not a systematized science. Until that time, when the Brahma recollected and told it to Daksha, until that time, it was not in an organized form. It was oral communication. It was not in the form of any books. It was not in the form of Samhitas, because we know from the Sushruta Samhita that Brahma also went on writing a Samhita, and that was known as Brahma Samhita. And thereafter, even the Indra wrote Samhitas. The Ashwini have written the books which are not available, right? So it was probably the period from where the organized section of the science of Ayurveda progressed, and therefore we call it as origin. And therefore, it is not the origin of Ayurveda, but it is the origin of Ayurveda in the form of Samhitas. So that is what is the Ayurvedavatarana says. And this is comprehended, what I'm talking about is comprehended by Chakrapani when he says Soyam Ayurvedaha Shashvato Nirdishyate. He brings about two forms of Ayurveda. One is Shabdarupa Ayurveda and the other one is Artharupa Ayurveda. Shabdarupa Ayurveda is where he talks about Shruti, Smriti or Kriti, right? Shabda for him happens to be the Samhitas, where Artha is the oral propagation. So oral propagation is one form of Ayurveda, and the propagation of Ayurveda in written form is one form of Ayurveda Avatarana. And therefore, from this, the story that we talk about Brahma Smritva, etc., it, it is probably the naming got as Ayurveda, and from here the Samhitas were created. It is effectively the origin of Ayurveda in the form of Samhitas, and not the real origin of Ayurveda, because real origin of Ayurveda has happened long back when the life started, and which is also comprehended when Charaka says, "So I am Ayurvedaha Shashvata Nirdishyate." So that is what is Ayurveda Avatarana is all about. And when we talk about Ayurveda Avatarana, we have directly three references, and the three references come like this. From Charaka Samhita, it is Brahma, Daksha Prajapati, Ashwini, Indra, Bharadwaja, Punarasvatreya, and so on and so forth. From Sushruta Samhita, it is Brahma, Daksha Prajapati, Ashwini Kumara, Indra, Dhanvantari. From thereafter, Aupadhenava, Vaitarana, Aurabhra, Paushkalavaka, Karavirya, Gopura Rakshita, Sushruta, and thereafter Sushruta Samhita gets created. Whereas if you look into the Kashyapa Samhita, Brahma, then immediately Ashwini Kumara comes, then the Indra comes, then we have Kashyapa, Vashishta, Tribhrugu, etc. And thereafter their Putra, Pautra, Prapautra, that is the sons, the grandsons of these rishis led to the propagation of Ayurveda. So this is what is Ayurveda Avatarana. And Ayurveda Avatarana, as evident in Ashtanga Hridaya, I quoted in the beginning the shloka, Brahma Smritva Yasho Vedam, Prajapati Majigrahat, So Ashwinau Tau Sahasraksham, So Triputradikan Munin, Tegni Veshadikan Setu Pratak Tantrani Tenire. Now, when we look into the Ayurveda Avatarana, it meant that it is Avatarana, it is landing, it is descent. Now, when we talk about landing, an aeroplane lands, right? From the sky, it lands. Now, landing means from the above region, it should come down. Landing means from one place, it should land into the other place. Right? That is what is the Avatarana of Ayurveda. That is what is landing meaning. Now, when we talk about landing, so we effectively come across with some geographical conditions. Like what are they? For example, landing from one place to the other place. landing from Bhuloka, from Indraloka to Bhuloka, landing from Devaloka to Bhuloka, landing from Swarga to Bhuloka. These are some of the terms that we generally use, right? So inadvertently, I have used three words here. Devaloka was one, the Indraloka was the other one, the Swarga was the third one that I used, and from this it came to Bhuloka. Now, this is what we learn as far as the Ayurveda Avatarana is concerned. So we know the fact that Bharadwaja went to Indra. From Bhuloka, he went to Devaloka to learn Ayurveda, and he came back. Now, this is what is the Ayurveda Avatarana that we learn. So we'll try to demystify this. What is Devaloka? What is Bhuloka? What is Swarga, etc. in the next few slides. Now, before I go to the next few slides, I have to tell you some disclaimers. I'm sure there are many students who are listening it, and the belief system of different students will be different. There may be students who are absolutely a believer of these Puranas. There may be the students who have got a strong belief system. They are there may be students who are extremely astika, or there may be the other end also. The nastika category also may exist, right? So what I want to say here is, we are hereafter trying to demystify what has happened in the past, taking a neutral stand, taking from the today's perspective. We are trying to learn these things as per our understanding on today, right? So therefore, some of the opinions that I will be sharing hereafter, you may not like it, you may not appreciate it, you may not want to hear it, you may get angry, you may get happiness. I'm using the negative emotions only because positive emotions are always they don't create any controversy or any bad things. So therefore, some of the opinions that I'll be sharing here, you may have difficulty in accepting it. If you find difficulty, you believe that they are absolutely the opinions of the speaker, and if you want to accept it, you accept it. If you don't want to accept it, there is no compulsion or anything. It is only a sharing of knowledge, and it is only an analysis of what may have happened in the past. So for this, there are some sources. The sources are, as I mentioned, 3 Samhitas are there, the Ayurvedavatarana context of those 3 Samhitas. Then we have for me, the source for this happens to be the Ayurveda Itihasa, Vaidyanika Itihasa, written by Privat Sharma. And I have another important book that I want to mention here is the Ayurvedike Praneta book, written in Hindi by a person called as Ratnakar Shastri, which was published from Mumbai. For him also, the sources are the Vedas, the Upanishad, and the Ayurveda Samhitas. So this is a disclaimer that I want to tell you in the beginning itself, because we're talking about demystifying something that we learn as Purana. Now, even when I say Purana means, of course, we have Vayu Purana, Garuda Purana, etc. as Puranas. But if you look into the meaning of the term Purana is opposite of Nava. So Purana means old. So old means something that has happened in the past. So old stories, old happenings, old events which are documented, and they became the Purana. So before I go to the next, maybe I have to make this statement that maybe in the ancient period, when the writing technology was not freely available, when there were not enough material to document everything, so the history itself got documented as small stories, and the small stories became the tales, because history is important because it shapes our future. And the ancient Indian grandmothers or the people knew about this, and they saved the history in the form of stories. And the stories To make it remember for long, they converted, they use some metaphoric language. They use some metaphoric language. They created some similes, created some adjuvants, so that the story is remaining forever for long. And therefore, of course, that is their effort has to be remembered, because without they, if they had not converted this Ayurveda Vatarana into this form of story, then obviously this part of history we would have forgotten long back. Because they have made it a story, we remember it, right? So maybe it was a technique where the history itself is written in some form of stories, and the stories are conveyed from one generation to the another generation. So through this story itself, we learn so many historical aspects also. Now, when I talked about this landing or the descent of Ayurveda, this happened from the Deva to the from Devaloka to the Bhuloka, from Deva to Manava, from the gods it came to humans. This is what we believe it. This is what we know it. So we'll try to look or learn what is this Deva or Deva Bhumi is all about, right? Symbolically, I'm showing one picture there. So we'll try to look into what is this Deva Bhumi, what is this Swarga, etc. So you would have learnt about all this. I mean, the Ayurvedavatarana in your Ayurveda Itihasa book. So I am not going to talk about all those things that are there in the book. I'm going to talk about something that might have happened in that place. Okay, the place of Ayurveda, we call it as Deva Bhumi, we call it as also as Swarga, right? So we know the fact that India or the Indian culture, Indian subcontinent has mastered many sciences long back, right? Ancient seers had mastered many sciences. One among them was Ayurveda, right? Ayurveda, there was many. Sthapatya Veda was, Dhanurveda was there, and metallurgy was there. Everything related to the mankind, the ancient acharyas, the rishis, had mastered it, and and mastered it. And this is not something that is new. And the among the various rishis, the Shrestha Rishi, someone who is more powerful intellectually, physically also, was used to become the Indra. Used to become Indra. Now, you would have learnt Indra as a god. Now, I want to convert them into an understandable meaning. Indra is the god of, we know it as is the king of the gods, and therefore Shrestha Rishi became the Indra, and he was the god itself. Indra was Raja, Indra was king, and he was Rajarshi. We'll look into what is Rajarshi, Brahmarshi soon after some time. Now, this Indra, who was a king, would have council of advisors. He had some ministers under his work, just like how the present day government also, there is one head and under him some ministries are there, and there are council of advisors, and they would see the complete administration. Like that itself, Indra also had a group of people who were ministers, who were advisors, who were who were in fact said to be 1,000 in number. Who there were 1,000 council of advisors and ministers, people who were under Indra were 1,000 in number, and therefore Indra was also called as Sahasraksha. If you look into the Vagbhata's quotation, Sahasraksha is the word that we say to Indra. So Indra Sahasraksha means he had 1,000 people who were ministers, the council of advisors, etc., who used to take care of the administration of the Indra's kingdom. And of course, the scientific tradition of Ayurveda started actually by the Ashwinis, right? Because if you look into all these Ayurvedavatarana, Brahma told to Daksha Prajapati, but we don't find any historical or the mythological evidences of Daksha treating any disease. And we don't also see the evidences of, so therefore, the Kashyapa Samhita says immediately after Brahma, the Ashwini comes into picture. So the scientific tradition of Ayurveda is based on basically giving treatment is what I mean. The scientific tradition, when I say giving treatment to the deceased, it started from the Ashwini Kumaras, and that happened in Swarga. And Ashwini Kumara taught it to Indra, Bharadwaja, and thereafter. And we come across with Bharadwaja brought it to Naraka. Now, this is a different word. Now, I said in the beginning, disclaimer, I am going to tell Swarga as not the heaven, because and Naraka is not hell also, because this is a creation of, again, human mind, because this Swarga, Naraka became hell and heaven for someone who followed Christianity, and they themselves become Jannat and Jahannam for someone who followed Islam, right? But I am talking about these words geographically. I am not talking about them as something whether they exist, because we don't know whether they exist also. Because a simple a trick that I can do is, whenever we talk about where is heaven, we point on top, right? On top. So what is this top? Do we have a top? Because we know the fact that this whole earth is in an orbit around the sun, which doesn't have any top and bottom. And this earth is also rotating all the time. Invariably, when I point on the top, someone who is on the other side of the globe, for him it is down. So therefore, the top, we don't know where is the top at all. So therefore, whether this heaven, hell exists, we are not sure about that. So therefore, when I talk about Swarga and Naraka, I am talking purely that this being a geographical location. I'm talking about the Swarga and Naraka as geography. And remember, Swarga, Naraka, we have assigned some meanings now. Swarga is a good place, Naraka is a bad place, is meaning that we have imbibed. For the time being, forget that Swarga is bad, Swarga is good, Naraka is bad. For the time being, you just forget that Swarga is good, Naraka is bad. You just say, there is a place, we call it as Swarga, there is a place, we call it as Naraka. So Bharadwaja learnt Ayurveda from this Swarga and brought it to Naraka. We don't know whether Naraka is good or bad. We don't know whether Swarga is good or bad. So this is what that has happened. Now, going ahead, we'll try to locate where is this Swarga is all about. We'll try to, because this all happened, Ayurvedavatarana itself has happened from Swarga to Naraka, from Swarga to Bhuloka. So we should find where is this Swarga is all about. Now, we get some references which says, particularly Valmiki Ramayana, particularly some Upanishad, etc. They come to rescue us. Even the Kalidasa's Raghuvamsha, they put the geographical meaning to the word Swarga. Swarga for them happens to be the place which is known as Parvatiya. Parvatiya means Parvata. Parvata means the mountains. The place which is at high altitude, which is a geographical location, they call it as Swarga. And by implication, lowland or the plateau, plain land became Naraka. Nothing is good, nothing is bad. Just remember it. So Swarga is a place which is at the high altitude, and Naraka is place which is in the lowland, which is in the plateau. So ಸಮತಟ್ಟಾದ ಪ್ರದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ನರಕ ಅಂತ ಕರೆದ್ರು, ಪರ್ವತಗಳಿಗೆ ಸ್ವರ್ಗ ಅಂತ ಕರೆದ್ರು. And we know the fact that the Deva that we call the gods, etc., the Deva is translated as gods. To what extent it is correct or not is again a point of debate. So Deva lived in the Himalaya, in the Himalayan mountains, or in the Tibet. Tibet is again a part of Himalaya, and Tibetan mountains are called as Trivishta in the Upanishads. So Deva lived in Himalaya and the Tibet, and when their population increased, they also came down in the lowland, that is the plain land also, for the propagation of their own beliefs, for the propagation of their own knowledge, and to develop societies, etc. they came down. This is what we get to know, particularly from the Kalidasa's Raghuvamsha. The shloka is also there, which may not be. If you want, I can share them also. Fine. So then, again, in one of the quotation, one more poet, Mallinatha, says the Himalaya as Devabhumi, and Himalaya is the high altitude place. It is mountains. And there is another reference which says the place of origin of Bhagirathi river is the place of Sura, and the place of Sura is known as Swarga. Swarga is the place of Sura, and Sura means Deva, Sura means gods also, we say it, because Sura opposite is Asura, right? So Sura means the place where Sura lived is known as Swarga, and this place is said to be the origin of river Bhagirathi. Now, river Bhagirathi origin can be traced now also, right? It again goes back to the Himalayan mountains. We know the fact that river Bhagirathi originated on the other streams. The river Alaknanda also originated at some stage, particularly what we call as Rudraprayag. They both merge, and after that they get named as the river Ganga, and it flows. And we can go to the root of river Alaknanda, we can go to the root of river Bhagirathi, and the origin of Bhagirathi itself comes up with a story that is a different aspect, but we can go to the origin of these places now also geographically. And the place of origin of Bhagirathi where Sura lived is said to be Swarga. And therefore, by looking into this, the Himalaya and the Himalayan mountains belong to Swarga Vesha. This itself is known as Devabhumi. This itself is known as Devabhumi. Why do we call it as Devabhumi? Because Devabhumi, Deva means someone who is capable of giving something. Deyatva is make them Deva, right? If I have abundance, if I have knowledge abundance, I can share. If I have wealth abundance, I can share. If we have anything in abundance, I can share. So anyone who gives becomes the Deva. Giver, of course, now also we go to Deva, God, we pray because we want something, right? So therefore, anyone who has got the capacity to give is known as Deva. And all these were the clan of people who were fully happy, living contented, and they were spiritually at the highest level. They knew what is life, and they knew that this physical body is about to die, and we have to make our mark in the society. We have to give something to the society, and therefore they gave wonderful creations, right? Why do we remember the Deva? Because for their gift, right? Because what they have given make them remember, right? That is what is the Deva meaning. And of course, India is such a country where we know the art of making gods. I always tell it to on many platforms, because for us, anyone who is great is a god. Cricket cricket lover, Sachin Tendulkar is a god because he has given so much to him. So anything who gives is known as Deva, and these were the people who were living in this geographical condition. We call them as the Himalayan ranges, as Swarga, Devabhumi. Now also, if you go to the Uttarakhand area, you have the geographical place itself known as Devabhumi. Devabhumi is a common name there. There is now also there is an education trust known as Devabhumi. They also have an Ayurveda college. So Devabhumi is again geography that we are talking about. So anyone who believed in giving was known as Deva, and anyone who did not, who believed only on physical life, that I should live happy, I should live happy, I should not worry about what will happen to the other. That category of people, we call them as Asura, right? So that category of people we call as Asura, and this is the difference between Deva and Asura. So giver, and again, the both mean, Asura doesn't mean any bad thing at this point of time. Asura means so who gave only importance to the physical life. And we come across with another context where Dasharatha is said to go to Swarga when he wanted some help for his own battle, he went to Swarga, where he met Kaikeyi and he married Kaikeyi also. So Swarga, again, this says that it is a geographical place. And Swarga, going to Swarga was a regular practice, and hence Angira, Bhrugu, Atri, Vasishta, Kashyapa, Agastya, Pulyasa, etc. They always went to Swarga and came back. It was a routine for them. And these were the group of people that you find in the Ayurvedavatarana context of Charaka Samhita also, where they conducted a meeting in the ranges of Himalaya to send whom to be sent to Indra to learn Ayurveda. So therefore, by this all it means that Swarga is more of a geographical area than the imaginary hell or the heaven. Okay, this is what we call imagine generally when we talk about the Swarga. And I'll bring about this picture in front of you, because this Swarga is not just the Himalayan mountains, its terrain is just large, quite large. So through this picture, I'm talking about the geography of Swarga. You can see, for those, okay, I'm sure that it is being streamed live, so you'll be seeing on a big screen. Now you can see this the whole geography except Dakshinapatha. We call it as except Dakshinapatha, except Prague, China, Manchuria, Mongol, and Arvan. You call the whole entire is known as Aryavarta. And this Aryavarta had 5 Ganatantra. 5 republics were there in the Aryavarta. You can see Naraka just below the Himalayan region on the same screen. You can see Kinnara Desha, you can see Nagaloka, you can see Devaloka, you can see the Gandharva Loka, you can see the Gandharva Loka. Kuluta is another word. So all these are the pictures that have been created by Professor. You can see on the screen. They have in their history, in their book, they have created such a map that had existed long back. So this whole that is above the Dakshinapatha, Naraka, and below the Mongol, Chin, Prague, etc., would now be called as Swarga. Now, this Swarga had 5 Ganatantra, as I said, and these are known as Panchajana. I will be slightly fast hereafter. And this 5 Ganatantra had, where one was Devaloka, the second one was Nagaloka, the third is Yakshaloka, the fourth one is Kinnara Loka, and the fifth one is Gandharva Loka. Now, the Devaloka, I have already mentioned about this geographical area in the Himalaya, just above the present Uttarakhand. Deva, of course, and we get to know in Chandogya Upanishad also, Deva and Asura belong to the same clan. So their origin is same. And Nandanavana is said to be the capital of the Devaloka, where Indra resided. And Trivishta, the Tibet, was also part of Devaloka itself. Nagaloka is the next loka. The headquarter of Nagaloka is Kailasa Parvata. And we hear the names like Vairinaga, Anantanaga, Sheshanaga, etc. as famous lakes that are present there now also. And Anantanaga is a name of a city also in present-day Kashmir. And this Nagaloka was headed by Lord Shiva. Shiva was the Gananayaka of this Nagaloka, and this extended up to present-day Kashmir. And the next one is Yakshaloka. The Kubera was said to be the head of this, and this is the present-day Alkapuri is said to be belonging to this Yakshaloka. I already mentioned about the origin of Alakananda, because the river Ganga origins in two streams. One is from Bhagirathi, and the other one stream comes from Alakananda, and this happens to be at the Alkapuri. We call it as Yakshaloka. The next loka is Kinnara Loka, which is the present-day Kulu, Kangra, and Jammu place, where the rivers like Bias is present-day name, where originally it was Vyas. Iravati is the old name of this river, and Rabi is the present name. Chandrabhaga is the old name of this river, and Chenab is the present name. All these are the tributaries of Sindhu river. right? They at some stage merge with the river Sindhu, which is now known as Indus River. And Kullu, or rather Kuluta, is was said to be the headquarter of this. And the people from Shaka Desha, just remember, Shaka means the present day Tashkent, always invaded this place, but they never conquered. So this gets connected to Kuru Vamsha. Shantanu, in fact, of the Mahabharata, married Ganga, and he married this legendary woman in near this river itself, and probably this is the reason why after this the river itself is named as Ganga and flows, because before this it was Bhagirathi and Alakananda. Only after this river is known as the Ganga, and the Ganga is the river, name of the river that we find originating from the Kinnara Loka. And Gandharva Loka is the next Loka. Gandharva Loka is a Loka which is present on both sides of river Sindhu. And the proof are there now also. The Kabul excavations are enough excavations that are done in 13th century, where we have the inscriptions written in Kharoshti. We know Brahmi and Kharoshti are the two most ancient lipis, right? So Gandharva Loka, the Pushkalavati is said to be the capital of Gandharva Loka. Pushkalavati is present day Charasadda city in Pakistan. And later this was the capital city was shifted to Purushapura. Purushapura is present day Peshawar of Pakistan. So you have these mountains in this region. Sindhu Kosha is Hindu Kush mountains present in Afghanistan. Turushka is present day Turkmenistan. Darad is a place where we get the Hingula in abundance, because Darada is another term called as Hingula. And you have in the Baluchistan city of Pakistan, you have the Hingla's temple, Hinguleshwara, or rather a Devi, a goddess who is known as Hingula. A temple now also exists, and this happens to be in Baluchistan area of Pakistan. And Baluchistan will be in the past was probably known as Bahlika Desha. Bahlika Desha, you come across with Bahlika Desha many times in Charaka Samhita also. So this geography is known as Gandharva, and this is the place from where the Gandhari came to marry the Dhritarashtra, and Gandhari came from Gandhara Desha, and therefore Gandhari is the name. And Gandhara Desha is present day Kandahar, which is presented in Afghanistan. And they were music lover people, and therefore the Gandharva Loka, we talk about the music, flowers, etc., musical instruments, etc. And now also we talk about Sufis, Persian singers, etc., which are evidently seen. And of course, we talk about on one side, people living below the Swarga, below the high altitude, were called as the Rakshasas, and people living on the west side were called as Pishacha. Both of them are not negative meaning at this point of time. And okay, so this is how we define what is the Swarga Naraka is all about. Now we don't get much about information about the other persons, but we get more about the Ashwini and the Dhanvantari. We'll talk about Ashwini and Dhanvantari. We'll talk about Samudra Manthana and end our discussion. Now Ashwinau, we'll title this as Ashwinau. Ashwini are two twins, and we know there are so many tsunamis occurring, there are so many earthquakes occurring, and all these are one or the other form of Pralaya itself. And Pralaya is a relentless process. Pralayas have been happening, have happened. And people, and whenever such things happens, particularly the tsunami type of things occur, then the people in the high altitude are more safer than those living in the low altitude. Probably this is the reason why the Naraka is the people where the suffering is more. Naraka is the place where the reptiles are more, where the threat to the life is more, where the wildlife are more. So therefore, the people in the high altitude are pretty safe. They have only one requirement, that is food. If they get the food, they are absolutely safe in safe region. So the people in the and it comes in Rigveda that the people who were in the mountains of north and south both. North mountains are the Himalayan mountains, and the south are the Vindhyas or the Sahyas. The people, Sahyadri means the Western Ghat, Vindhya means the mountain ranges present in the Madhya Pradesh present day. So they saw melting ice and boiling sea. This is written in Rigveda. So boiling sea means the sea level was high, and they saw glaciers also, right? Melting of ice. And this, many believed that this was a one form of pradaya. And there are incidentally, there are people who believe that some would have escaped this pradaya and located in Himalayas later, and they started society once again, right? Some may have escaped, some may have survived even during this pradaya kala, and they took abode in the Himalayan mountains, and they again started the society. The people, the population again started, right? Just now, how even though the pandemic has taken so many lives, the birth is a continuous process. The population, there hasn't been any substantial reduction in the population also, right? Even when the pradaya occurs, there may have some people who survived and went and stayed in high altitude and started new life. And Swarga, one of the meaning of the term Swarga happens to be Jyoti and Sukha. Swarga is the place where the Jyoti, that is the sun rays, are constantly coming, and sun rays are absent if you go into the thick, dense forests down south. And Sukha means the bliss or the happiness is there in this Swarga. And of course, from here, when everything has to have a new start, then the new society was formed, new rules were formed, new moral values were developed, and therefore the society itself started new. And someone who had survived the pralaya and retained all his knowledge was Brahmadeva. Now we know that we have assigned Brahma as four-headed person who is the creator of the Srishti. Maybe this is what is the creation of Srishti. The creation started afresh, and someone who guided the whole process of creation, who made social rules, who guided the people how the way to live, was a person by name Brahma, right? So this is what we mean by Brahma is the creator of the universe. Maybe this is what has happened. And he was Jnana Vriddha and Vayo Vriddha. He created society as well as he treated the needy, right? He treated patients also, right? This is important. Using the herbs he treated, and he recollected all that he had learnt in the past, all that he had acquired through his own experiments, and shared it to Ashwina. So this is how the Ashwini Kumara got the knowledge from the Brahma. Brahma had knowledge, because in spite of seeing the pralaya, he survived the pralaya, and he led to the development of society, and therefore he shared it to the Ashwina. Now, these are the Ashwino. Ashwini are the Ashwini Kumara. They are twins. The names are Nasatya and Dasra. They are, of course, it's a gift by their mother, this chariot. They always have this chariot, and this chariot makes them travel to different places very quickly. And Surya is said to be the father of Ashwini. And remember, this Surya need not be the sun itself, right? And we now also have this legacy, right? That we name people after some things. Now also the Suryas are there. Now also we name so many things, right? Now also the Vasudev sir is there. Is he the Vasudev that we talk about? So like it's a naming legacy that has carried out. So Surya may be a person. Ashwini, Surya and Ashwini were the parents of Nasatya and Dasra, who were the the Ashwini Kumara. Many sages like Bhrugu, Atri, etc., they made ashrama near the river banks downline, because many of the rivers have their origin from the Himalayas, and we know the civilization progressed only at the banks of rivers. Now also, if you look into any big cities, it is in a river. Ahmedabad, there is a river. Hyderabad, there is a river. So river served as the as river bank served as the growth of societies, right? So therefore, Vasishta, Kashyapa, Agastya, Pulastya, Vamadeva, Sita, Gautama, etc., they all made ashrama near the river banks down the line, and they migrated from the lowland from the highland to the lowland. At some stage, they did not accept the Deva to be their ruler, and therefore their own rule started downline. This is called as Naraka. Naraka doesn't mean any negative things. It is only means the place which is at the lower altitude, plain land. This is because this was considered nature because of presence of various snakes, various wildlife. These are the major threat to the life. We don't know from where the reptiles come. We don't know from where the lion comes and hits me. So the life is at risk in Naraka. That's why it is considered to be lower in its importance. And comparatively, it is also said that in the southern part of the India, Dakshina Patha that we call it as, the life was slightly easier. Now, among the list of sages that I have mentioned, Pulastya came down to the Dakshina Patha and established his ashrama. And from the Pulastya Rishi itself, we later see the prominent king, another king who is known as Ravana. Right. So this is to say that Ashwinau served in Swarga. They came down to the Naraka also, and they traveled in different part of Aryavarta. Now, okay. So in the beginning itself, I have mentioned probably Brahma was the first one who named this science as Ayurveda. So therefore, Brahma is given importance. Ashwinau gave medical services both to Devaloka, to many people in the Devaloka. They treated in Panchajana. Panchajana means if you Ganatantra that I have mentioned, Aryavarta, Dakshinapatha. So their domain of giving medical service was just too much. And Nasatya, Dasra were their name. They studied, they analyzed how to use the medicinal plants. And they knew the one thing, that the plants have got this, the source of plants happens to be Jala. Jala is also known as Osha, and therefore Aushadha is what they made, and from there the Aushadha word is also having its origin. And probably they knew the art of making Amrita also. Now we'll try to demystify what is Amrita soon, but they learned how to make Amrita also. And Brahad Ashwagandharishta, Gopala Taila, Gudapippali, Brahad Vasavaleha are the formulations that are developed by the Ashwinaus themselves. And maybe they have written their own Samhitas. Maybe all these Samhitas were present in those in the libraries of those ancient universities of India. Maybe it is Takshashila or Nalanda. Nalanda is said to be one of the famous library where this person by name Bhakti or Khilji burnt it, and there are references which says that it took 30 days for burning of the whole library of Nalanda, and some even say it took 90 days. Just imagine the wealth of the information that has been burnt. It has got manuscripts of maybe Brahma Samhita, maybe the Samhitas written by the Agnivesha Krita Tantra was also available. We lost this is 6 students of Agnivesha wrote Samhitas which are also not available. All these are lost, burnt in the that were there in the library of Nalanda, burnt by the invaders. Fine. So therefore the links are missing. If they were there, then we would have easily connected one thing to the another thing, and would have understand all these things. And there comes one other incident in the life of Ashwini, the Saurashtra Raja Sharyati. Sharyati is the king of Saurashtra. Saurashtra is present-day Gujarat. The Sukanya was his daughter. She was playing with her friends in a forest, in a garden, where he saw the blinking of eyes in a anthill, and she was puzzled. She was curious to see, and she pricked it with a thorn, and suddenly the blood started coming, and thereafter she realized that there is a person who is meditating, who is doing his dhyana, and he was Chavana Maharshi. And this all happened in the banks of river Narmada. So bleeding started, and Sharyati, by knowing this, he was Chavana Maharshi who was doing some meditation, and his daughter troubled him. He in fact gave a punishment to the Sukanya to serve Chavana, and therefore he wedded her with the Chavana Maharshi. Chavana was already old at that point of time, and Ashwini Kumara did prepare Chavana Prasha. Chavana Prasha was prepared so that to give strength, virility, energy to Chavana Maharshi. This is a historical event. And this picture is talking about the very same fact. Anthill is there, the two eyes can be seen, and Sukanya is pricking it. So this is a historical event that has taken place. Another important aspect of the Ashwina happens to be he treated the Nakshatra Raja Chandra. Now again, Daksha had 28 daughters. Daksha and the Atriputra Chandra married each one of them one after the other in a Swayamvara. So Swayamvara was there. So those daughters selected all the time the Chandra. Chandra is not the Chandra that is there in the moon. Chandra is again another person who married 27 to be specific, and he suffered because we know, we learn this also in Charaka Samhita, the Pratiloma Kshaya occurred and he suffered from Rajyakshma. And he had to be treated by Ashwini again. Ashwina created this Brihad Vasavaleha and treated the Chandra. And this Atriputra is Chandra. Atri had another son who was Punarvasu Atreya, and the younger son was Chandradev. So this is how the Ashwina helped the Chandra to get rid of his Rajyakshma. And the Ashwina basically was a person who was very compassionate, who would help any person who is suffering from diseases. He used to dress, he used to clean they used to clean the wound, etc. And therefore the Indra was also not happy with the Ashwina. He said he is an unhygienic person. He will be with the patients all the time, and he used to insult the Ashwina all the time. But then Chavana emphasized this and told Indra about the importance of the Ashwini, and therefore thereafter, having learnt the importance of Ashwini, the Indra learnt the very Ayurveda from the Ashwini Kumara, and then the Indra also become an Ayurveda Tadnya. So this is about the Ashwina. Now we shall look into the Dhanvantari and the Devodasa Dhanvantari and Samudra Manthana, and we'll end the discussion. This Dhanvantari is traditionally said to be the Ayurveda Janaka, and this Dhanvantari is said to be having his birth on Dhanatrayodashi, that is today. And this is the day when the Samudra Manthana took place. So many Ratna came. One of the important Ratna was Dhanvantari holding the Amrita. And this Dhanvantari that we are talking about is also known to be the author of Dhanvantari Samhita. And after this we come across with one statement where Diyodhasa is the name of and Dhanvantari is designation. That is, there has been one person by name Dhanvantari. Anyone who became greater as Dhanvantari was also known as Dhanvantari itself. And Dhanva means Shalya Chikitsaka, and there is another meaning for Dhanva, that is, Dhanva means Marubhumi. And Marubhumi means the desert. And by this implication, someone who is more famous up to the land of desert is known as Dhanvantari. That is, he was so meticulous practitioner of Shalya that he was famous in entire Panchajana, entire Aryavarta, and beyond Aryavarta also he was very famous. So Dhanva means Marubhumi, and Marubhumi was known as Urapradesha, and it has to be remembered that we are talking about the period when there was no, when we talk about Marubhumi, we immediately remember Thar desert of Gujarat, right? Kutch. So we don't we are talking about the time when the Thar desert or the Gujarat desert was not there. So because we know historically that Gujarat desert did not existed 4,000 years behind, and we're talking about something that has happened 10,000 years behind now. Fine. So Marubhumi, when we talk about Marubhumi, we are talking about directly talking about the Arabian countries. We're talking about Mid East. So, which is to say that this Dhanvantari was so famous for his practice, for his surgery, skills of surgery, that he was famous up to the Saudi Arabia. And Urapradesha means Arabia. Ashtadhyayi of Panini is the evidence for that. For this, Charaka also in one context gives an example of Dhanva as Jangaladesha. So this Shalya Shastra Parangata was Divodasa, who is coming next. Will fix these two personalities. There are two personalities by name Dhanvantari, and Sushruta Samhita is Moola Grantha, which was rewritten again by his own student, the Sushruta Samhita. The original Sushruta Samhita, Vriddha Sushruta, we call it, is not available, and this Dhanvantari all were the Kashi Raja. They were the king of this Kashi. And remember, Kashi, by the logic that we have learnt, was being in the Naraka. Doesn't mean that it is any lower land or less important. It only means plain land. Okay. Fine. This is the pictorial presentation of this Dhanvantari. Okay. So what is the speciality of Dhanvantari? Dhanvantari also learnt the art of making Amrita from the Swarga itself. And Aryavarta was at that, during the period of Dhanvantari, there were only three kingdoms. One was Kashi, one was Kosala, and the other one is Magadha. And this part of the Indian subcontinent only had more population. On the other side, the population was not much. Even when you look into the birth of Muhammad Paigambar, which is said to be the first of the 2nd century BC, before that it was a nomad. There were not many people. It was a nomadic location. And there were also, I mean, if you look into the Muhammad Paigambar's history, you will get to see that he was also had to deal with the people who were worshipping murtis. So that is to say that the Indian subcontinent had reached to that extent also. So by his skills, he gave popularity to Kashi. Kashi became the center of excellence. It became education hub, and there were two kind of rishis that were. I mean, we have saptarshis, but during this period we see predominantly two kind of rishis. Rishis, we have one meaning as researcher also. The sages, the saints, Rajarshi and Brahmarshi. Brahmarshi means those who completely dedicated themselves to the propagation of jnana. Rajarshi is one who was administratively the king as well as the propagator of knowledge. So Rajarshi means king also. So therefore Dhanvantari was a Rajarshi. Atri, Bhrugu, Vasishta, Gautama, Vamadeva, etc. are the Brahmarshis, whereas Dhanvantari was a Rajarshi. And I was talking about this is geographically, symbolically presenting to what extent the Dhanvantari was famous during that period. The green picture tells us about the to what extent Dhanvantari was famous as a ruler as well as a surgeon also. Now, this is the genealogy or the. Just a minute, sir. ಹೌದು. ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಹೌದು ಸರಿ ಹಾಂ ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಸರ್ ಕಳಿಸಿ 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 ಸರ್ ಕಳಿಸಿ ಆಫ್ಲೈನ್ ಇದು ಓಕೆ 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 ಸರ್ ಓಕೆ ಡನ್ ರೈಟ್ ಸರಿ 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 ಓಕೆ ಸಾರಿ ಫಾರ್ ದ ಇನ್ಕನ್ವೀನಿಯನ್ಸ್ okay so I'm giving a list of names. Kasha is the name of the king Kashi. His son was Dirgha Pataha. His son was Dhanva. His son was Dhanvantari. His son was Ketuman. His son was Bhimarata. His son was Divodasa, and so on and so forth. So among these we have to give importance to two Dhanvantari. One is the Dhanvantari, who was the son of Dhanva. The second one was Divodasa Dhanvantari. And we call them Abja Dhanvantari, which is, we just now talked about the Vishnu Avatara, etc. So we have two Dhanvantaris to be discussed. We'll discuss about the first. So this is what we mean by Samudra Manthana that has happened. Now a question comes, has it happened? Is it historical or mythological? Is a question I will try to answer now. Now, when the Samudra Manthana was done, I'll not tell you about the story that you know, right? When the Samudra Manthana was done, these the different references are there regarding what came from them, from out. So one reference says these 14 Ratna came, and what are these 14 Ratna? There is Lakshmi, there is Kaustubha Mani, there is Parijataka, which is Vriksha, there is Sura, which is Varuni, there is Dhanvantari, Chandrama, Kamadhenu, Airavata, Apsara, Rambha, then Ashwa, which is known as Uchchaishrava, then Visha, which is also known as Kalakota, then Saranga, then Shankha, Amrita. All these came. This is what we get to know. Now, if you look into these, we have Parijataka, which is a Vriksha. We have Airavata, which is also equated in, which is also a synonym of a tree. We'll come to that soon. So there are, and Amrita. Amrita is nectar, that we call it as. Nectar is, when we, English meaning of the nectar is the nectar that the honeybees collect from different flowers. Different flowers they collect and make honey. So honey therefore becomes the essence of all those plants, all those flowers, right? So likewise, Amrita was created from many plants, and some of plants already I have mentioned. So, okay, we shall look into what the Samudra Manthana may be. During the period, the two strong nations were present in Devaloka, that is Swarga and Asura Desha. Now, Asura Desha is the Assyrian culture. By geographically, that may be in the present day geography, which is just on the other side of the Saudi Arabia, which also now also exists. If you remove A from that Assyrian, you have a country called Assyria. Maybe that existed, and this was a conflict between the Devaloka and the Asura Loka, that is the Swarga and Asura Desha. Both were part of the Aryavarta. They differed in thought process. I have already mentioned about those who believed in giving were Deva, and those who had physical living were called as the Asuras. And there were relations also between them. There were interactions that were also taking place. But then Deva were called as Amara, and because they gave importance to the actions and not their own, not for their own materialistic needs, and therefore we now also take the name of Dhanvantari because he did so many things. We now also take the name of Brahma because he did so many things. Now also we take the name of Indra, Ashwina, etc., because they have done it, and this is what we mean by they become Amara. During Dhanvantari, the political structure was slightly different, and Aryavarta, which was big, which included from the Marubhumi of the Mid East, the Saudi Arabia, to the Tibet and the Himalaya on this side, and below up to the Vindhya. So this was a big geography, and everyone wanted to control it. And Dhanvantari also wanted to take control of all this geography. Dhanvantari, remember, he was a king. He was a Rajarshi. He was a king as well as Rishi. So Dhanvantari also did something called as Ashwamedha Yajna. Ashwamedha Yajna, we know a horse is let out, and every wherever it doesn't stop becomes the part of that king. So probably this Ashwamedha Yajna that the Dhanvantari did, the horse reached up to the desert that is present in the Assyria. Now this is the pictorial. Of course, it is not. It is just a Google image. I tried to symbolically present before you the in the you know where is Banaras or where is Kashi. You know that was the headquarter of Dhanvantari, and he's was famous up to. I have put an arrow on the map. You can see Assyrian culture. He was famous up to that place. So he's the horse went up to that place is what is the meaning. Now, when obviously when it reaches, then has to be the conflicts. Maybe that would have happened. Now we talk about Amrita. Amrita, of course, we will never find the truth of Amrita. Maybe there are there are different meanings. Maybe it's a multi-drug formulation which has got Chandralata or Somalata in it. And Airavata, as mentioned, Airavata has got Karamarda has synonym of Airavata. Maybe it was also added in that formula. The always, I mean, Indra always made precautions to preserve Somavalli, which was also cultivated. The Somavalli is a plant that was used to make the Amrita. And this is Amrita, the ambrosia, we call it as the food of gods. It is tasting Amrita. And this is what we mean by Amrita. Now, Samudra Manthana, okay, what is Samudra Manthana then? Manthana, we know it as churning, and we know we conduct so many seminars also, we title them as Manthana. Manthana means thinking, Manthana means analyzing, right? So maybe it was the analysis, Vaicharika Manthana, that would have taken place in that geography. And it has to be remembered that Asura were regular visitors to Devaloka because they had problems. They did not had much vision of what would happen in the future, and therefore for all those problems they used to visit the Devaloka. And probably when they asked the formula of the Amrita, they were denied by the Deva did not give it. And so therefore there may be a Vaicharika Manthana that took place at Sumeru Parvata. Sumeru Parvata is we find it in Samudra Manthana. And Sumeru, okay, if you look geographically, the Mount Meru is not Sumeru Parvata because Mount Meru falls in the African country. So therefore, Meru means Parvata, that is the high altitude, and we come to Tian Shan ranges. I'll show you the picture of Tian Shan ranges, where Vasuki Naga Shankara, where he was the judge, right? You know, Shankara, the Shiva, he drank the Kalakuta Visha also, was basically meant to oversee or head this debate that happened, Manthana that happened between the Assyrian people and the people of Devalok. Fine. So and we know Naga is a place again. And Shankara, we have already mentioned that he was the Gananayaka, and he's of the Nagaloka, and his headquarter was the Kailasa. Okay. Now this Samudra Manthana, we have demystified the Amrita. We know what is Manthana. We will try to find out what is Kshira Sagara. It happened in Kshira Sagara. We know Sagara means ocean. Ocean will never have sweet water. Always the ocean water is saline. So therefore, Kshira Sagara is again a word which is to be opened up. So it is a source of sweet water or potable or drinkable water source. And Kshira Sagara means it should be a big source of water. Now, this Tian Shan range, which is there in present day Kyrgyzstan, I'll come to it. Tian Shan is a mountain range, And this mountain range, in between these ranges, there is a big lake which is measuring 180-kilometer long and 70-kilometer wide, with square or rather the with 6,236 square kilometer area. This is a lake, and it's a big lake. If you look into 180-kilometer long wrong water source, then obviously you'll not call it as river also, because it is going to be too big, and generally we call it as the sagar itself. Now also it has to be remembered, the people in Russia called this lake as the Sea of Kyrgyz, right? And this is surrounded by glaciers, so therefore it is always full. It is surrounded by mountains which have got a lot of ice, hima, and therefore it is always full. And the term kshira is used for milk, and milk is sweet, and therefore this water should be a sweet water. This is when we talk about kshira sagara, means a sagara which was sweet to taste. And this incidentally is present in present day as Izia Kul, and is present in Kyrgyzstan, and is also known as Kyrgyz Lake. If you look into the Kyrgyzstan, the word Kyrgyz is also an apabhramsha of Kshira, and Sthana means location. So it is Kshira Sthana or Kshira Sagara. Kyrgyz is apabhramsha of Kshira. Kshira in Russian language is known as Kir, and therefore Kir is sweet itself. So Izias is water, is the European language meaning. And I said Russians now also call it as Sea of Kyrgyz. Even though it is a lake, they call it as Kyrgyz, Sea of Kyrgyz, because it is so big. So in fact, historically, we come to one conclusion, that Dhanvantari made Amrita available everywhere, here also. Now, this is the Iziakul. This is the screenshot that I took yesterday itself. Lake Iziakul, which is there in the Kyrgyzstan. So, as I said, it is at the altitude of 1,600 meters, which is 180 kilometers length and 60 kilometer width is what is available here. So these are okay. Then okay. This is the map picture of Iziakul. You can see the Iziakul there, the Kyrgyz lake, which is the biggest source of water, which is so big. And you can see just beside that Iziakul, you have Tian Shan mountains. Tian Shan mountains are the mountains which we equate to Sumeru or Meru Parvata. Right. This is just above the Indian state of Kashmir, and adjacent to present day Afghanistan, that we call it as Kyrgyzstan. And these are some more pictures of that lake, and this is the lake that we call it as Kyrgyzstan. And okay, so these are some more pictures of that. Right, you can see some people walking just like they walk near the sea. It looks as if it has got a beach, right? So this is the sweet water resource of Iziakul Lake of Kyrgyz, and this is where the Samudra Manthana would have happened historically. Samudra Manthana effectively does means that the Somalata started being grown. That is, Somalata started being grown here also. And until recently also, Somalata was a wonderful drug for many respiratory diseases. And it was a powerful bronchodilator that acted as like an Amrita itself. So this may be the story or the history that has happened with reference to Kshirasagara, and all this is therefore is a supportive information to say that this is not just a myth but a history, and the history could not be documented as it is because the technology that we have today was not available at that time. So therefore the whole history was converted into 4 or 5 line shloka which tells about the story of Samudra Manthana, and demystified as historically like this. And historically, we also find many such future things also. I'll not talk about what happens after this. We come across with the names like Aurabhra. Aurabhra came to Kashi to learn Ayurveda. Right? He said to be a student of Dhanvantari, and he came from Uttar Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh is again the Saudi Arabia, or the place where the sand is more. Paushkalavaka is another person. Now, if you look into the persons, the students of Punarvasu Atreya or Punarvasu or the Dhanvantari, there are names which are names, and there are names which talk also about the geography. Push, Paushkalavaka is a person who came from Pushkalavati. Pushkalavati was the capital city of Gandhara Desha. Gandhara Desha was there in the present day Afghanistan, Pakistan. Pushkalavati was the Charsadda city. Again, yesterday itself, there was a message. There was a message that I read. I mean, there was a news that so many people died in Charsadda. Charsadda is the name of a city which was earlier Pushkalavati. A person, Pushkalavaka, came from there to Kashi to learn Ayurveda. Kankayana is the person who came from Bahalika. Bahalika, I gave you one meaning as Baluch. Before Baluchistan also, it was known as Babylonian culture. And Babylonian culture is basically the precursors, or rather the ancestors of present-day Iraq. So Bahalika, from the Iraq, he came to Kashi to learn Ayurveda and went back. Gandhara, I had already talked about. Parashara, person came from Purushapura. Purushapura is present day Peshawar. So these are some of the historical evidences that we can take to demystify whether what has happened in the past is really a history or it's a mythology. If it is a mythology, then we need no scope to think and analyze. And if we deem it as history, of course, some links will be missing now also, but there has been such efforts to understand, and maybe these efforts could have been much better if the Nalanda was not burnt. So with these inputs, I hope I have tried to demystify what has happened in the name of Ayurvedavatarana. What was Swarga, what is Naraka, what is Samudra Manthana, who was Dhanvantari, and who were Ashwinav. So I think I have done justice to the topic that was given to me. If there are any questions, I'll take the questions, or else I thank the organizers for this opportunity, and as well as patiently hearing me. I stopped sharing my screen.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening and thought-provoking session. Now, I would like to request Dr. Mantesh to render vote of thanks.
Respected dignitaries, today on the occasion of National Ayurveda Day, we conducted national level webinar program. On this occasion, our today's eminent speaker, Dr. Anand Katti sir, enriched our knowledge by enlightening the truth hidden in Ayurvedavatarana by giving logical explanation to mythological story. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I also thank our beloved principal sir, Dr. Gajanan Hegde sir, who encourages and also gives timely suggestions. Thank you, sir. Thank you for standing as a backbone for all our activities. I also thank organizing committee members, Dr. Srivatsa sir, Dr. Anurupa ma'am, Dr. Mohan Kumar ma'am, and Dr. Vasudev Chate sir for organizing and coordinating the event successfully. I also thank all UGs and PGs for their patient hearing. Thank you all.
Thank you.